Well, I'm Joe Atkins. I'm a state representative from Inver Grove Heights. I'm joined today, and you'll hear from Representative Greg Davids from Preston, Minnesota, a Republican, and Tom Huntley is also here from Duluth. He's a Democrat. A friend of mine in the Minnesota Senate taught me years ago that if you go to a press conference and there's only Democrats there, your likelihood of passing legislation is very slim. If you go to a press conference and there's only Republicans there, your likelihood of passing your legislation is very slim. If you go to a press conference and you see both Democrats and Republicans, it becomes much more likely that you'll be able to get something done. This is the sort of bill that some have described it as the Travelocity for health insurance, or the Expedia version that would allow you to purchase health insurance online. My goal with this legislation, and I think the goal of most of our co-authors, is to have a competitive online marketplace where individuals and small businesses can go to purchase health insurance. On an apples-to-apples competitive basis, you can look at your health insurance options and make a decision. For a small law firm like mine and for many of the small business people I know, this is about jobs. If you can get online, save a few dollars on your health insurance, that's money that you can put into your business to grow your business, to hire people, to put folks to work. That's what this bill is about. I was very, very pleased, and this will be my final comment, but I took this bill around on Monday seeking authors and was very pleased to find several co-authors on both sides of the aisle, including three of the people that I have the most respect for on the other side of the aisle, Representative Davids being one. He's the chair of the Tax Committee, Representative Hoppe, who chairs the Commerce Committee, and Representative Abler, who chairs one of the Health Committees. In addition to that, we have several others on the DFL side, including Representative Huntley and Representative Murphy, who are as close to healthcare gurus in this body as you get. And it's very pleasing to me to have those co-authors. I consider myself more a steward of this bill, trying to find a pragmatic solution so that we have a Minnesota-made solution to this rather than a federally imposed one. And with that, and on that note, I think I'll turn it over to my friend, Representative Davids, who will probably talk about the federal folks.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I would really like to thank Representative Atkins for bringing this bill forward. I look at, well, you could look at parts of the bill and say, well, maybe not everything's perfect. That's not the point here. I'm on the bill because I believe in states' rights. And although I'm certainly not a supporter of Obamacare, it is the law of the land, and I think we need to abide by the law, and I think we really need to concentrate on having a state exchange rather than a federal exchange, because if we do not do this, if we do not get a state exchange together, there will be one for us, and I do not believe that we want the federal government to write our exchange for us. So I think we need to move forward here, and some would say, well, you know, this is part of Obamacare. Well, you know what? It is, because the law says either you have a state exchange or the federal government will have one for you. I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will find Obamacare unconstitutional, and the bill is at that point not needed. But as we stand here today, Obamacare is the law of the land, and we need to comply with the law of the land. And whether it be insurance regulation, banking regulation, you just go right down the list. I've been very consistent in my 20 years in the legislature that state regulation, in my mind, always trumps federal regulation. And so I thank Representative Atkins for bringing this issue forward. I think we need to act on it. We need to act on it now. And to have authors such as Huntley and Murphy and others from the DFL side of the aisle, I think brings so much credibility to this bill. And I'm hoping we can get this passed and sent to Governor Dayton for signature. I'll turn it over to Representative Huntley.
Well, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but guru has not been one of them. Geek might be more appropriate. I would also like to thank the two previous speakers for signing on to this bill. I think it is something we have to do, and we need to do it the Minnesota way. The healthcare system in Minnesota is very different than probably all but 3 or 4 other states, in terms of the fact that we have large healthcare clinics. We have very few physicians in solo practice, and that's not the case typically nationally. So we need to do things the Minnesota way. And the Secretary Sebelius has given states a lot of options in the things that we can do. For instance, the benefit set package, obviously there will be some baseline requirements, but there are also all kinds of flexibility for individual states to do what they think is best for their state. And therefore, I think that we needed to move ahead and get this passed. And I would like to thank Commissioner Rothman, who has set up the task force that came up with this. And he is a real taskmaster, I must say. That we had all kinds of meetings very rapidly. People really participated and worked hard, and we now need to move ahead and try to get something done in the legislature.
And with that, folks, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I've got one for you. How close is the bill to what the task force had made recommendations on?
Verbatim. No, I'm just, it was we did our very best to capture what the task force's recommendations were. And I would say that we are virtually there relative to what the concerns were that were raised by the task force.
And what differences are there?
Only very, very subtle. I mean, there was some, I'll give you an example with respect to the size of the governance board. I believe that we are at 19, and there was a discussion that it should be 15 to 20. There was some, alternative. Some people were talking 11. We opted for a little bit on the larger side. But that's why I describe myself as more of a steward of this bill than necessarily the chief author, as I am trying to navigate between some different desires in terms of what the bill would carry out. All right, anybody want to go online and buy health insurance? I think if we just held this up, we could probably start right here, and we'll hopefully 16 or 18 months from now we'll be able to go online with a device like this and literally shop apples to apples comparison, shop for our health insurance, hopefully save small businesses and individuals some money, and get packages that meet their needs.
Maybe I could ask your Republican colleague, their legislation last session didn't come to pass. Why this session?
Well, there are some on our side of the aisle that will have nothing to do with anything that says Obamacare. And then there are some of us, and I made the speech in Commerce last year that went something like this: I believe Obamacare is a scourge upon society and should be repealed or found unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court. That being said, as I said earlier, it is the law of the land. And if it comes to state regulation versus federal regulation, I know which side I come down on every time. And I've been talking to many colleagues on my side of the aisle to try and bring that message forward that if we don't do this, we're going to get it from the feds, and we're not going to like it. A very, very simple message. So I think as we come closer here, and if we can get some votes going here on this bill, hopefully there'll be enough people that focus in on it on both sides of the aisle and say, we need to do this, let's get it done.
But why won't this fail again this year?
Well, I don't know that, as far as failing last year, it really didn't get any legs. I guess it did fail because it didn't pass. But I think as we come closer to deadline dates when this has to be done, I hope there's more of a sense of urgency this year than there was last year. And I wish we could have done it last year, because now we're going into campaign season, and we get into the silly season. And I'd like to, while we're still in session here, get some things done that matter, and this is one of those issues.
And aside from yourself, who among the Republicans is signing on?
I think we as Representative Atkins noted, I believe Representative Abler is on, and chair of the Commerce Committee, Hoppy. So you've got the Health and Human Services Finance chair and the Commerce chair, and Representative Atkins and I know how tremendously powerful the Commerce Committee is. So I guess you got the three chairs, or current chair and two former chairs of the Commerce Committee on this bill, because we work with this maybe a lot more than the other members do that are off talking about education and transportation and all the things people talk about around here. And so I'm hoping as people focus and they get the facts, and I'll be standing up in my caucus pushing this bill very hard as to why we should do this. Certainly there'll be some pushback, but I'm hoping that there'll be a critical mass on both sides to this year get this done. And
Representative Gutwald?
who else do we have? I don't know.
And I visited with Representative Gottwalt. I think you should visit with him directly, but he wasn't necessarily opposed to the bill, but he wasn't prepared yet to be an author of the bill.
And among the people who've signed on, are there any joiners this time around who were against it last time?
I don't know that. I've been for the state exchange since Obamacare became law rather than the federal, but I don't know if we picked up any support.
I don't, and honestly, last year's bill didn't really, I think it got introduced, it was brought to the table and then withdrawn at the committee table. I don't believe that any of us were really a big part of that effort last year. So I don't even know who the co-authors were on that bill. Unless there's anything else, thank you all very much. Have a good afternoon.
I had one other.
Yes.
Just in terms of, this is kind of remedial, but in terms of the governance of the exchange, as you're thinking about it, where will it live? Is it part of the government?
Do you have a room available?
For the right
It's Department of Commerce has the get-go portion of it, but it's being set up as a board that would have all the rights and responsibilities that any other board. Quite a bit of ability to act on its own. Once the appointees are made, those appointees would make most of the decisions. They'd be subject to Minnesota laws. It would be no different than any other board, but would not be completely privately run.
But it would be analogous to what?
We've got how many hundreds of boards and commissions and that kind of thing that in Minnesota.
The board of listening?
Yeah, with a different, set up in the same sort of appointment fashion. The legislature's got 8 appointments. The governor has 4 appointments. Various entities have the ability to appoint, and then it would have the authority to make decisions relative to the marketplace.
And then the board would decide if it's operates within the Commerce Department or if it operates as an independent nonprofit.
I wouldn't describe it as operating within the Commerce Department. It would certainly be, it need to abide by Minnesota laws, so it couldn't run afoul of any of the enforcement actions that the state of Minnesota would have. But just like any other health insurer, in fact, the bill itself talks about the same products available outside and inside, trying to have a level playing field between products that are available outside the marketplace as inside the marketplace. But the goal was to give it as much authority as we could and not have it just be a government-run entity.
So it would be kind of a hybrid then?
That's how I've been trying to describe it. Obviously it's still subject to Minnesota laws, and there'd be 3 commissioners sit on the board. So there's some interaction between them, but it's not run by the government.
Is it like the Met Council then?
I don't like to compare anything to the Met Council.
I don't know anything about the Met Council, but I mean there are lots of.
It's a very good question. I don't. It's an interesting. School board, as Tom said, might be a good example. We've got individuals or a zoo board. Not an elected body, but a board where you've got folks that have been appointed that then have the authority to make decisions about, for example, with the Minnesota Zoo, the direction that the Minnesota Zoo will take.
Yeah, this board will work closely they'll work with the federal government too. I mean, it'll be almost like a conduit, but we'll have a place in Minnesota that we can go to regarding these issues rather than not having any place to go in Minnesota and going out to a 202 area code. 202 area codes make me nervous. And I don't really want to have Minnesotans have to dial 202. I'd rather have them dialing 651, 612, 507, those types of area codes.
Well, and I think people understand if we don't do this by January 1st of 2013, the federal government will do it for us. And we'd much rather, I think the one thing everybody agrees on, we'd much rather have a homegrown Minnesota-made version of this competitive online marketplace that serves our needs rather than one done for us by the federal government.
Are there any other bills that you know of in your chamber or the Senate?
I'm not aware of. There was the one that was introduced last year by Representative Gottwalt that has not gone anywhere. I'm sure that there are others that people are probably thinking about, but none that have been introduced. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a good afternoon.